1,355,591 seed samples. Inside vacuum-sealed aluminum bags. Inside boxes stacked on metal shelves. Inside a vault carved into solid rock. Inside a mountain, 130 meters deep, at minus 18 degrees Celsius, on an Arctic island 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. Everything humanity has cultivated in 10,000 years of agriculture fits inside 3 cold rooms the size of an apartment. If everything else disappears, the food of the future starts here. In Svalbard, the place where burial is forbidden, where polar bears outnumber humans, and where leaving town without a rifle is a decision that might be your last. 3 things before we go further. 1. No burials have taken place in Longyearbyen since the 1950s. Permafrost freezes bodies permanently. They don't decompose. And the viruses inside them don't either. In 1998, scientists exhumed bodies of victims of the 1918 Spanish flu and found the virus perfectly preserved, still intact, 80 years later. The burial ban isn't superstition, it's virology. 2. Anyone leaving the settlement perimeter of Longyearbyen must carry suitable means to scare off polar bears. The governor of Svalbard recommends carrying a rifle, not a shotgun. A rifle of caliber .308 or larger with expanding ammunition weighing at least 10 grams. There are approximately 3,000 polar bears across the archipelago and around 2,500 residents in Longyearbyen. The bears outnumber the people. 3. Svalbard is the only place on Earth where any person of any nationality can live and work without a visa. An international treaty from 1920 guarantees it. Norway has sovereignty but cannot restrict entry. The result is a community of more than 50 nationalities living in the northernmost permanent settlement on the planet. That's Svalbard, where cats are banned but rifles are recommended, where alcohol sales are rationed to prevent the kind of problems isolation breeds, where seeing a whale from your living room window is unremarkable, but seeing a doctor for anything serious means a flight to the mainland. A place where death is regulated, birth is discouraged, predators are your neighbors, and borders don't exist. And at the center of all of it, a vault holding civilization's insurance policy. Subscribe to Impossible Lands, because what comes next is the most absurdly engineered place to survive that exists on Earth. Longyearbyen was founded in 1906 by an American businessman named John Munro Longyear, who came to mine coal. The town carries his name. For over a century, coal was the reason this settlement existed at 78 degrees north latitude. Today, the last Norwegian coal mine in Svalbard has shut down. What remains is scientific research, Arctic tourism, and the logistics infrastructure supporting the global seed vault. But coal left its mark. The town was built around the mining industry. Cables that once carried coal from mines to port still cross the landscape like steel skeletons. Mining-era buildings dot the hillsides. Rusted machinery sits where it was abandoned, too expensive to remove, slowly being consumed by the landscape. The coal era left Svalbard with infrastructure designed for extraction, not habitation. The transition from mining town to research outpost happened in a single generation, but the physical residue of a century of industry still marks every sightline. And one detail captures Svalbard's transition better than any statistic. Longyearbyen receives approximately 115,000 visitors a year. 35,000 arrive by cruise ship. Tourism replaced coal. The polar bears that once threatened miners are now the main tourist attraction. The predator became the product, the threat became the brand. Renting a rifle from an authorized dealer costs roughly 300 Norwegian kroner per day. A flare gun is cheaper but won't stop a charge. Tour operators include polar bear safety briefings as standard. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The animal that makes Svalbard dangerous is the same animal printed on every souvenir, every postcard, every tourism brochure. You come to see the bears, you rent a gun to survive them. The entire economy runs on the tension between wonder and threat. The town has one grocery store, a university campus for 300 students, a small hospital that can't handle births or serious illness, a church, streets with numbers instead of names, an airport with regular flights, and one problem that defines every aspect of daily life: the cold. Average annual temperature, minus 6 degrees Celsius. In winter, it regularly drops to minus 25. The sun disappears completely for 4 months. During those 4 months, darkness isn't metaphor, it's absolute. It's called polar night. And when it ends, the midnight sun arrives. 4 months where the sun never sets. Svalbard doesn't have intermediate seasons, it has extremes. Permafrost covers everything. Beneath every street, every building, every meter of soil, the ground is permanently frozen, or it was, because Svalbard is warming at a rate that defies projections. Temperatures have risen 4 degrees since 1971, 5 times faster than the global average. Glaciers are retreating, avalanches are becoming more frequent. Buildings constructed on permafrost are starting to shift as the ground beneath them softens. Longyearbyen's infrastructure was designed for a world that no longer exists. In 2015, an avalanche hit Longyearbyen directly, destroying several houses and killing 2 people. It was the kind of event that had been considered almost impossible given the town's location. But warming temperatures destabilized the snowpack on surrounding slopes, creating new risk zones that didn't exist when the town was planned. Some residential areas have since been evacuated permanently. The town that was built to withstand the cold is now being threatened by its absence. But before talking about what's melting, there's what doesn't rot. You can't be buried here. Not because dying is illegal, as dozens of poorly sourced internet articles repeat. It's because permafrost preserves bodies indefinitely. In the 1950s, Longyearbyen residents discovered that corpses buried decades earlier hadn't decomposed. Frozen ground acted as a permanent refrigerator. The initial concern was sanitary, intact bodies rising to the surface through freeze-thaw cycles. But definitive confirmation came in 1998, when an international team of scientists led by medical geographer Kirsty Duncan exhumed bodies of miners who died during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. The result was a finding that changed modern virology. The virus was intact, preserved in frozen tissue 80 years later, with its complete genetic structure. Scientists were able to reconstruct the genome of the 1918 virus, an advance that contributed to vaccine development against future pandemics. But the discovery also confirmed the risk. If permafrost thaws, buried pathogens can reactivate. And Svalbard is warming 5 times faster than the global average. What began as a sanitary precaution became a climate warning. Svalbard's dead don't rest in peace. They wait, and what they carry inside waits with them. Pregnant women must also leave Svalbard at least 3 weeks before their due date. The hospital can't handle births. No neonatal pediatricians, no dedicated midwives. A complicated birth at 78 degrees north, hours of flight from the nearest fully equipped hospital, is a risk the authorities won't accept. So in Svalbard you can't be buried, and you're advised not to be born. Both extremes of human life are regulated by geography. There's also no retirement home, no long-term care facility, no nursing services. If you reach the point where you can't take care of yourself independently, you leave. Svalbard is not a place that accommodates frailty. It was built by and for people who can function in conditions that would disable most. The average resident is younger than in any comparable Norwegian town. Old age doesn't happen here, not because people don't age, because those who do are sent somewhere else. The island edits out the parts of human life it can't sustain. But there's one threat that isn't managed with policy. It's managed with gunpowder. Svalbard has approximately 3,000 polar bears, the largest land predators on the planet. Curious, relatively fearless, and completely unpredictable. They can shift from curiosity to aggression without warning signs. They run faster than most people imagine. They swim faster than you can row. And they're one of the few large animals that actively hunt humans for food. Anyone leaving the settlement must carry protection. The governor recommends a rifle of caliber .308 or .3006 with expanding ammunition. Handguns aren't recommended due to insufficient range. Shotguns require at least 12 gauge with 4-round capacity. Pepper spray is prohibited. Inside Longyearbyen, firearms must be carried visibly unloaded. Outside Longyearbyen, loaded and ready. The local university, UNIS, requires all students and staff to carry a rifle and flare gun on any field excursion. Tourists leaving town must rent weapons from licensed dealers with prior certification. Domestic cats are banned across the entire archipelago to protect Arctic bird life, but rifles are standard equipment. About 10 years ago, 2 students from the mainland visited a friend in Longyearbyen on the outskirts of Longyearbyen. The friend wasn't home. They decided to take a longer, more scenic route back to the center. They didn't bring weapons. It was an impulse. A polar bear appeared. One of them tried to play dead. With polar bears, that doesn't work. Grizzlies might lose interest. Polar bears don't. One student died. The other survived by jumping down the hillside. In Svalbard, an unplanned walk without a rifle can be the last decision you make, and there's a protocol visitors discover upon arrival. You can't carry a loaded weapon inside town, but you also can't take firearms into shops or public buildings. If you encounter a polar bear inside Longyearbyen, call 112 immediately. Outside town, the protocol changes. Warning shots first. If the bear keeps advancing, you're authorized to shoot in self-defense. If you kill a bear, you must report it to the governor immediately, preferably with witnesses. An investigation follows. Killing a polar bear without justification is a serious offense. Killing one in self-defense is an administrative procedure. The line between the two is a split-second judgment call at -40, with a 500-kilogram animal meters away. Svalbard operates under a legal framework unique in the world. The Svalbard Treaty, signed in 1920 by more than 40 nations, recognizes Norwegian sovereignty over the archipelago, but with an extraordinary condition. Any citizen of any signatory country has the right to live, work, and conduct economic activities in Svalbard. No visa needed, no work permit required. It's the only territory on the planet with an open border policy guaranteed by international treaty. The result is that Longyearbyen houses residents from over 50 nationalities. The largest community after Norwegians is Thai, a fact that surprises even the residents themselves. But there's a catch. If you can't take care of yourself, you must leave. No retirement homes, no long-term social services. If your health deteriorates to the point where you can't manage on your own, the government sends you to the mainland. The freedom to enter is total. The obligation to fend for yourself is too. And it's precisely in this context that humanity decided to store its most important insurance policy. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, opened February 2008, carved into the side of a mountain 130 meters deep through solid rock, cutting through permafrost. The entrance is a rectangular monolith of concrete and steel, jutting out from the snow like a cubist bunker. A 100-meter tunnel leads to 3 storage chambers, maintained at -18 degrees Celsius. The natural rock temperature around the chambers sits between 3 and 6 degrees below zero, but the chambers are cooled further by a local power plant. Even if electricity fails permanently, the permafrost would keep the seeds frozen for decades. The concept is simple. Roughly 1,700 gene banks worldwide store agricultural crop seeds. Those banks exist in countries with wars, natural disasters, funding crises, and equipment failures. The gene bank in Aleppo, Syria, held some of the world's oldest varieties of wheat and barley. The Syrian civil war destroyed it, but duplicates of 80% of that collection were already in Svalbard. In 2015, the first ever withdrawal from the vault took place. The Syrian varieties were replanted in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley and in Morocco. Their offspring were collected, processed, and returned to Svalbard. The seeds completed a full circle, from war to ice, from ice to soil, from soil back to ice. The vault has capacity for 4.5 million samples. It currently stores over 1,300,000 from 132 depositors worldwide. More than 6,500 different species. 69% are grains, rice, wheat, millet, corn, barley. 9% are legumes. The rest is a vast array of fruits, vegetables, herbs, and other plants, including cannabis and opium. No genetically modified organisms. The largest single collection is rice, 85 million seeds. India is the country with the most seeds deposited at 95 million. Total capacity is 2.5 billion seeds. At current levels, the vault is barely a quarter full. There's room to duplicate every seed in every gene bank in the world, with margin for species not yet discovered. Storing seeds is free. Each country and gene bank retains ownership of its deposits. Only they can withdraw them. The vault operates on a black box principle. What goes in is yours, and only you can take it out. But in 2016, something happened that nobody anticipated. Unusually high temperatures caused meltwater to penetrate 15 meters into the entrance tunnel before freezing. The seeds weren't affected, but the incident revealed what climatologists have been warning about for years. The permafrost, trusted to protect the world's seeds, is thawing. The entrance was reinforced. Tunnel walls were waterproofed. Heat sources were removed. Exterior drainage channels were dug. The system was upgraded. But the lesson didn't change. Civilization's most important insurance policy is stored in a place that the very crisis it's designed to protect against is actively undermining. The vault was built to survive the end of the world. What nobody fully accounted for was that the end wouldn't come all at once. It would come slowly, degree by degree, millimeter of meltwater by millimeter. In 2025, an additional 120,000 seeds from 13 native African tree species were deposited, including the iconic baobab. The Palestinian seed bank in Hebron was destroyed in 2025. War-driven withdrawals are increasing. The vault, conceived as a last resort backup, is becoming a frontline resource. The distance between theoretical apocalypse and actual apocalypse shortens every year. Svalbard isn't waiting for the end of the world. The end of the world is arriving piece by piece, gene bank by destroyed gene bank. Back to that first number, 1,355,591 seed samples. Everything humanity learned to grow in 10,000 years, sealed in aluminum bags, stacked on shelves, stored in rock, protected by permafrost. 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole, on an island where you can't be buried, where the sun vanishes for 4 months, where bears hunt you and rifles are school supplies. Humanity chose the most inhospitable place on the planet to store the one thing that guarantees it can keep eating, and that place is changing faster than anyone predicted. The question isn't whether the vault will hold, it's whether what surrounds it will hold long enough. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on Impossible Lands.